Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador arrived in Guatemala as part of his international tour that takes him to countries in Central America and the Caribbean. In Afghanistan, at least 22 people have been killed and 40 injured due to heavy rains and floods, which also caused severe damage to some homes and crops in several western provinces of the country. Prime Minister Boris Johnson's Conservative Party lost control of key councils in London, according to partial results from local and regional United Kingdom elections on Friday. Hi, this is From the South. I am your news anchor, Diego Martin. From the TeleSUR studios in Havana, we begin with the news. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador arrived Thursday in Guatemala to begin a tour of Central America and the Caribbean to try to order the migratory flow to the United States. López Obrador arrived at an Air Force base in Guatemala City and later met with Guatemalan President Alejandro Yamatei at the National Palace. Thousands of undocumented Central Americans and Haitian migrants are often detained at the U.S.-Mexico border in search of work in North America, overwhelmed by the violence and poverty that afflict their countries. The Mexican president is scheduled to visit also El Salvador, Honduras, Belize, and Cuba. More than 330 cases of human rights violations have been reported in El Salvador over the last few weeks. Salvadoran humanitarian organizations reported having received more than 300 complaints of human rights violations during the state of exception decreed by the executive. According to the report, most of the complaints relate to cases of arbitrary detentions by the national police during the latest crackdown on gangs. Panama's Interior Transporter Council is organizing a strike on Thursday in the province of Chiriquí. The transporters demand a fares revision by the government and that progress be made in the granting of concessions for land routes in the region. The union expressed its willingness for a dialogue to solve the conflict. As part of the strike, the drivers are planning to hold a mass at the transport terminal of the Chiriquí province. The Caribbean Community and Common Market, CARICOM, warned that they will not attend the Summit of the Americas if exclusion policy is maintained. The ambassador of Antigua and Barbuda to the United States, Ronald Sanders, revealed that CARICOM would consider absenting itself from the Summit of the Americas, convened for next June in Los Angeles, if Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua are excluded from the meeting. The diplomat assured that Joe Biden's policy towards the region followed the strategy outlined by Donald Trump, while regretting that no high-level consultations were held since President Biden took office on the U.S. policy towards the Caribbean. Also, the Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador announced his rejection to the holding of a summit without Cuba. The Brazilian Armed Forces assured the Supreme Court they will respect the process around the upcoming presidential elections in October. A statement was made by the President of the Federal Supreme Court, Luis Fuz, after a meeting past Tuesday night with the Brazilian Minister of Defense, General Paulo Sérgio Nogueira de Oliveira. Fuz underscored that the Brazilian Supreme Court aims at safeguarding harmony between the powers, respect for institutions, and democracy in the country. Brazil enters the electoral campaign in a scenario of polarization, with President Jair Bolsonaro championing the idea that the armed forces should carry out a parallel vote count, accusing the Superior Electoral Court of lack of transparency. Venezuelan Foreign Minister Felix Plasencia continues his official agenda during his visit to the plurinational Republic of Bolivia. The Venezuelan diplomat pointed out that Bolivia and Venezuela are committed to multilateralism against intervention, which only causes pain and war to the region. As part of his work agenda, the Venezuelan foreign minister is expected to meet with the Bolivian President Luis Arce, as well as with former President Evo Morales, to review issues of both nations' interests. In addition, Plasencia expressed his rejection of the intentions of the government of the United States to exclude several countries of the region from the Summit of the Americas.
We support the strong statement of President Luis Arce and the responsible comments of Foreign Minister Maita. We join in this effort to reject and denounce the possibility of unilaterally deciding who is American and who is not American. The responsible peoples, the responsible governments of the region cannot allow this to happen without raising our voice in rejection.
We're going to take a short break now. Please join us again after this. Hi and welcome back to From the South. The Colombian armed group Clan del Golfo, or Gulf Clan, announced an armed strike in 4 departments of the country due to the extradition to the United States of Dairo Antonio Usuga, also known as Otoniel. The Gaetanista Self-Defense Forces of Colombia announced that the armed strike will last 4 days and those who do not obey the order will be discharged. The first violent actions of the armed strike took place in the departments of Cesar and Sucre, where buses burnings were reported, while the greatest tension is in Antioquia, where Otoniel lived. Military and national police forces deployed a special security device on the main highways of the departments of Antioquia, Córdoba, and Bolívar. The Peruvian Congress admitted the interpellation of the Prime Minister Aníbal Torres for his handling of the cargo transporters' strike and his role in the Constitution project promoted by the executive. The proposal was approved with 73 votes in favor, 42 against. Therefore, the head of the Council of Ministers will have to appear before the legislative plenary next May 12th. The questions of the interpellation will revolve around Torres' management of the violent protests of cargo transporters and the bill promoted by the national government that seeks to draft a new constitution. For his part, Torres stated that he is prepared for everything and considers that the Congress is going to remove him from office. The Chilean Constitutional Convention approved on Wednesday an article that guarantees the right of indigenous peoples and nations to their lands, territories, and resources in the future Magna Carta. The Chilean constituents voted on Article 21st in the framework of the revision of the new report of the Fundamental Rights Commission. It was approved by 106 votes in favor, 37 against, and 10 abstentions. This article also establishes that the Chilean state must create a legal instrument that guarantees the restitution, reparation, and regularization of lands to indigenous peoples. Analysts assure that, together with the Constitutional Declaration of Chile as a plurinational state, this article in favor of ancestral lands is one of the most important achievements of the indigenous peoples in the constituent body. In Afghanistan, at least 22 people have been killed and 40 injured due to heavy rains and floods, which also caused severe damage to some homes and crops in several western provinces of the country. Afghanistan's National Disaster Management Authority Communications Chief Hasibullah Shikani said the western provinces most affected by the rains and floods are Badghis, Faryab, and the northern province of Baghlan. The International Committee of the Red Cross is collaborating to assist the victims, whereas calling on other international organizations to join in providing assistance. Somalia will hold its presidential elections on May 15th. The Somali parliament announced Thursday that the long-awaited presidential election will finally take place and that its 329 members will elect the nation's 10th president. The election date will coincide with the 79th anniversary of the Somali Youth League, formed on May 15th in 1943 by 13 young activists who spearheaded the struggle for a united and independent Somalia. The presidential candidates are scheduled to address Parliament ahead of the vote on May 11th and 12th in order to present their respective government policies proposals. The presidential election is 15 months behind schedule and comes after Somalia concluded parliamentary elections in April. Mali's transitional government had denounced France for hiding information related to a mass grave site discovered in April of this year. Authorities initiated an investigation into the discovery of an alleged mass grave site in the surroundings of a former French military base in the city of Gossi in the region of Timbuktu, discovered by the Malian armed forces. This was announced by the member of the transitional government, Abubakar Siddiqui Fomba. He added that Malian authorities also launched an investigation to search for possible nuclear waste. And on Thursday, Gambian President Adama Barrow appointed a new cabinet 5 months after general elections were held. Of the 23 ministers selected, 11 retained their posts, including 3 women, local media reported. As part of the changes, Barrow created the portfolio of Chief of Staff, which will be held by Maud Cisse. The new officials will carry out transformations to make the state structure more efficient, said government spokesman Ebrima Sankare. The current head of state, Barrow, who on December 5th was declared the winner of the presidential elections by the National Electoral Commission, will lead the country as re-elected president for another 5 years. Tunisian journalists protest against what they say is growing repression and intimidation against the press since President Kais Saied's power grab last year. The demonstration was organized by the National Journalists Union, the SNJT, which condemned authorities' attempts to tame media outlets and to turn them into propaganda channels. Saied last July sacked the government and suspended parliament and dissolved the assembly, ruling by decree, after which seized the control of key state institutions, including the judiciary and the electoral authority. According to SNJT, Saied has not held a single open press conference since his power grab, reflecting a communications policy that does not recognize citizens' rights to know what is happening in their country.
Threats already existed for the last 10 years, but after July 25th, the threats have become more pronounced. They are more violent and affect the whole sector. It is true that during the last 10 years, the sector was marginalized and suffered from attempts to control it by the authorities and parties in power. We thought that after July 25th, attitudes would change.
We have more news coming up after a final short break. Please stay with us. Hi and welcome back. Prime Minister Boris Johnson's Conservative Party lost control of key councils in London, according to partial results from local and regional United Kingdom elections on Friday, with a potentially historic change looming in Northern Ireland. The main opposition Labour Party of Keir Starmer won control of long-term Conservative strongholds in the capital, including Wandsworth and Barnet, as well as Westminster for the first time since 1964, with around a third of English votes counted. Poor results could reignite discontent within Prime Minister's ruling Conservatives about his leadership after a string of recent scandals. Johnson has tried to sideline the so-called Partygate scandal that last month saw him become the first British Premier to be fined for breaking the law while in office. China affirmed on Thursday in the United Nations Security Council that NATO's expansion into Eastern Europe not only failed to make the region more secure but planted the seeds of the Ukrainian conflict. The Chinese permanent representative Chang Yun said that the safety of all countries is essential, since it is not possible to guarantee the security of one country at the expense of the insecurity of another. The Chinese ambassador stated that NATO waged its wars against sovereign countries, leaving intentional victims and humanitarian disasters. The official also urged the international community to create conditions for negotiations between Moscow and Kiev and facilitate a political agreement between the two countries. Belarus denounced that Western powers are preparing to carry out military operations in Russia's neighboring areas. The headquarters of Belarus's armed forces informed that Western countries, led by the United States and NATO, continue to concentrate troops in Eastern Europe in order to prepare for military operations in that region. Minsk warns that NATO has doubled its forces and that its attack units may be deployed near the borders of Russia and Belarus in a very short time. In contrast, the NATO Military Committee declared that the NATO-Russia Founding Act on Security, formed in 1997, will not serve as a deterrent for the bloc. Russia expelled 7 Danish diplomats in response to similar action by the Copenhagen government. The Russian Foreign Ministry officially notified the Danish embassy in Moscow that 7 of its employees have been declared persona non grata by Russia. The ministry notified that the 7 employees had 2 weeks to leave the national territory and explained that the Kremlin reserves the right to take additional measures in response to Copenhagen's hostile actions, which will be notified to the Danish side at a later date. The Russian Foreign Ministry summoned Denmark's ambassador in Moscow, Carsten Sondergaard, and protested against the unjustified expulsion of Russian diplomats from its embassy in Denmark. A Mariupol resident experienced firsthand the violence of Ukrainian nationalists in Azovstal in the context of the Russian-Ukrainian conflict after surviving an artillery attack that destroyed her house.
We were in the basement of a school since March 17th. My apartment was bombed, I suffer burns, I can't straighten my fingers. They have been treated with different ointments, but apparently they have stretched a little, and I have a big wound on my arm.
In Armenia, protests continue for the 4th consecutive day to demand the resignation of the Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. Local authorities reported that at least 13 people were arrested in Yerevan. Protests were resumed by the opposition early Thursday morning, blocking the main streets of the capital. Since April 25th, the opposition called for demonstrations throughout Armenia, claiming that the government's policies are harmful to the country and to the self-proclaimed Republic of Nagorno-Karabakh. The World Health Organization estimated nearly 15 million people were killed either by the coronavirus or by its impact on overwhelmed health systems in the past 2 years, according to William Zamburi, technical officer at the WHO.
We estimate 14.9 million excess deaths associated with the COVID-19 pandemic by 31 December of 2021. So this estimate ranges from 13.3 million to 16.6 million. There were 5.4 million reported COVID-19 deaths to WHO over this period. So this excess estimate represents 9.5 million more deaths, or 2.75 times more deaths than reported. Most of the excess deaths, that's 84%, are concentrated in Southeast Asia, Europe, and the Americas. Lower middle income and upper middle income countries account for 81% of this 14.9 million number.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said that he is working with African counterparts to save the local pharmaceutical company Aspen Pharmacare in order to produce COVID-19 vaccines. Ramaphosa made the statement to the South African Broadcasting Corporation Thursday after company executives warned of a possible closure due to a lack of orders. The president said he was cooperating with his peers in Egypt, Ghana, Kenya, and Rwanda. The South African Health Department unpacked the new COVID rules, including the mandatory use of face masks in public spaces. The new regulations came at a time when South Africa reported a new wave of COVID-19. Children will wear masks in school, and adults are also required to wear masks in enclosed public places. For any indoor and outdoor planned assembly or meeting involving more than 100 people, a maximum of 50% of the venue capacity may be occupied if all attendees are vaccinated. Regarding travels, all international visitors must be vaccinated and show a vaccination certificate or provide a negative PCR test result not older than 72 hours. South Africa is the continent's most affected country by COVID-19. Here, less than 45% of the adult population is fully vaccinated. And we've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at TeleSUR English. You can also join us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I am Dio Martin. Thank you for watching.